Buddha.
We're not exempt from hardships. We're not exempt from going through conflict in a relationship. So one of my uh, areas when I was ready to start this podcast, I had to be vulnerable enough, like you say, you know what? I have to lean into it. It is what it is. I'm on a mission. We have a husband and wife podcast, a couples podcast. We're becoming intimate. We wanted to have a community where we can show people some real life.
Right.
We're actually being vulnerable with boundaries.
Right.
You know, we tell 98% of everything.
We do.
You know, everything is not for the world.
Right.
But we wanted to give our community enough authenticity, enough vulnerability where you can see what it's like behind the scenes in real life.
I mean, well said, brother. Because brother.
Stupid.
Also, like when you are vulnerable, you open the doors to potentially being hurt.
Right.
So when you're vulnerable, especially like let's just say in a relationship, and you choose to be vulnerable, there's a possibility through that vulnerability that you're choosing that you could get hurt. And so the fear of being hurt, because we all know what that feels like, can also stop you from being vulnerable.
So here's the thing, though. Because you said there's a fear there
Yeah.
of possibly being hurt.
Yeah.
There is actually no way that you can be vulnerable without accepting uncertainty.
Very true.
There's no way that you can be vulnerable without accepting that it's risky.
Right.
There's no way that you can be vulnerable without accepting that it takes courage to be vulnerable,
It does.
because it's so much backlash that can come with it if everything fails. It's that uncertainty
Right. Right.
that we are afraid of
Right.
by becoming vulnerable in our relationships, vulnerable in our friendships, vulnerable with certain information about us.
Right.
It's just because behind vulnerability is also the monster of shame,
Right.
and guilt.
Right. And
Embarrassment.
Embarrassment. But I want to back it up a second because
Okay.
you said something that clearly, like my mind just, it is stuck there. You said vulnerable with boundaries.
Right.
Love that. Love that so much, because when you talk through vulnerability and you think through vulnerability and you exercise vulnerability, I personally feel that everyone doesn't deserve your most vulnerable
No.
part of you.
No.
Right? So vulnerability to me is done best like in your safe space with your safe people. Now, in my life and in my circle, like there is a very small amount of people that I'm willing to be vulnerable with. And I've learned that just through life maturation experience, that everybody doesn't deserve to know that most vulnerable side of Big Shay, because it is intimate, it is sacred, and it does lay me before you pretty naked, which everybody just doesn't deserve that side of me.
Right. Right.
So as I'm personally navigating through what it means to be vulnerable, and that vulnerability is actually a positive thing,
It's a strength.
I pick and choose. I pick and choose who I share with. I pick and choose, really mostly for me, who gets to see that naked emotional side of me.
Right.
Because it's easy for me to give you just enough and keep it moving. Very easy. But it's hard for me to give people that intimate, emotional, how I'm really feeling, what I'm really processing, and just to be super transparent, because that transparency also opens the door to healing, help, love, support. You feel more courageous. You take the load off your back and can move forward in whatever situation that you may be going through.
It's a good point, because the reality of things, Big Shay, is relationships, period, is all about the law of reciprocity.
That's good.
And you made a statement just now saying that everyone doesn't deserve that vulnerable place. And I 200% agree with that.
Good.
Well, here's the thing though about vulnerability. And when you're not vulnerable, you're basically saying that you have some emotions that are closed off, shut down.
Well, go deeper, Big Charles.
Right? Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
100%.
So when you say that you have some emotions that are closed off and shut down, mm-hmm. Here's the thing about when you shut down emotions. You cannot shut down. You cannot handpick what emotion that you want to shut down without affecting the other emotions that you are naturally born with. You can't say I'm going to be closed off in this area and then say I'm going to really 100% experience happiness and joy in this area. This is the thing about emotions and being cut off and not being vulnerable.
I love where you're going with this.
You see what I'm saying?
I do. I love where you're going with this.
You don't get to pick and choose. You know what? I'm going to shut off right today.
I love where you're going with this.
Because energy is everything. Energy is everything. So because if you are a shut off person, if you are a closed off person, guess what? That means that you're not giving everything to me. You're not giving me happiness. You're not giving me who you really are, because you don't get to pick and choose what emotion that you're going to close off without it affecting the other emotions.
Yeah. Can I just help a little bit?
Go ahead.
With a little example. And this example, I'm going to get a little bit personal.
Okay.
If that's okay. So when you just said that you can't pick and choose what emotion
you want to
shut off with, I just want to shut it off over here.
Right.
So for example, I'm gonna just bring it full circle to make it. Can I make it plain?
Yeah, you can make it plain.
So for me, as I've been on this healing journey, haven't always been vulnerable with my husband, haven't always been vulnerable with my children, haven't always been vulnerable with my own self, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I've come to realize just by listening to you, but also being able to be fully transparent about it. Why? Because that's no longer the story, right? Mm-hmm. Tell the story now because I'm no longer in that place. So there was a point in time in our relationship, in our marriage, that I was not completely vulnerable with you.
Right.
And I wasn't vulnerable with you because there were areas in my life that had caused a lot of hurt, pain, trauma that I didn't understand and had never really dealt with. So I chose to close off in a certain kind of way because of those unhealed areas in my life, unspoken, untalked about areas in my life. So then I wasn't being transparent with you. Mm-hmm. I wasn't being fully vulnerable with you. Mm-hmm. And now that I think about those times when I wasn't vulnerable with you, I also wasn't vulnerable with my kids. Mm-hmm. I also wasn't vulnerable with myself. Mm-hmm. So that means that I showed up to the world in the relationships that matter the most to me,
right?
Not giving my full self, but thinking that I could camouflage that and that I was, but not knowing that I was really exposed.
Right.
But I was willing to continue to give 50% of Big Shay just because I didn't know how to be vulnerable and I didn't know the power of vulnerability.
So here's the thing, though. Did I cut you off?
You did.
All right, well, keep going then.
But go ahead.
No, go ahead. There's a thing of power of vulnerability. I don't want to be rude.
No. It's go. It's all right.
So, because
you feel something, you got to say it. Just it's cool.
It's just the fact that there's an unspoken language in all of us that none of us realize that we are speaking when it comes to spirituality and energy. So I don't care how we had happy moments. We were happy still.
Absolutely.
We still had a great marriage. Absolutely. While you were still closed off. You know, but it's still a more powerful energy that supersedes the natural when certain chakras or when certain emotions are closed off.
Absolutely.
So when my wife, and thank you for sharing this, when my wife wasn't all the way vulnerable with me. As a husband, I can feel that. And what that would do is, for me, that will trigger point my insecurities or my fears and my vulnerabilities. What? Okay, I can tell you're not being all the way vulnerable with me, so why would I want to be all the way vulnerable with you?
Right.
If that makes sense.
Complete.
And honestly, when you say that when a person says that they're afraid of being vulnerable, that means they are afraid to tell people and show people who they really are. So when I went through my maturation of accepting and leaning into vulnerability, I was able to grow, do my homework, do my research, do my application. Then I can see where you were coming from, and even in your vulnerability, which allowed me to even have grace for you as well. And but my point that I was making is, when you weren't being vulnerable, it made me feel like, and this is years in marriage, it made me feel like I'm laying in bed with someone that I really don't know to the core of her. And I felt like that wasn't fair.
Right.
So I'm saying to the listeners, when you're being closed off and you think you're hiding something, there's an unspoken, more powerful energy that you can't even explain. And people can read that. People can tell that. It's just like, and you can cut me off whenever you get ready. It's just like in friendships. You can tell when there are surface level relationships, when you only talk about certain things. You don't want to talk about intimate things.
Right.
And that can affect the other person on the other end that's actually being vulnerable.
That's true. Yep.
If I'm trying to bring it together, it's like how you can. It's the same things in a marriage. It's the same thing in a friendship.
And here's the thing. I'm gonna cut you off now. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Here's the thing. Because I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because it really speaks volume to. Speaks volume to how you can extend grace when you know better, right? Because like I just said, a few years ago, I was not your most vulnerable person. I think even so much so that even on the Big Dog Talk podcast, they are getting another side of me because I did the work outside of...
You're doing it.
Outside of the mic. So whether they like it, don't like me, like what Big Shay talking about, I really don't care. Why? Because I'm really and truly showing up who I really am, right? So I'm saying that to say, when healing is a journey, right? Today we're just talking about one aspect of it, which just so happens to be vulnerability, which trickles down into other areas of, of our life and our relationship and how we show up into the world. But you brought up a point where when you understand the power of vulnerability, but you may be in relationship with someone like you were with me, or you may have a friendship where, the other end is not being vulnerable, you are able to give them grace, just like you gave me grace. You can extend that grace where it needs to go, because you understand that them not showing up vulnerable has nothing to do with the fact that they don't want you to know. They just want to keep secrets. It's fear there. And they have just not tapped into that part of their journey to heal that area in order to be the best, show up as their best self in those particular relationships.
Exactly.
Because you could have done something very different. If you weren't the husband that had been doing the work for many, many years and able to extend grace to me when I was not being vulnerable, shutting down, not wanting to have real conversations, not want to talk about, have tough conversations to impact and extend the health of our marriage, you could have very easily got frustrated with me, and that could have very easily sent us...
Wait.
You did get frustrated.
Wait.
You did.
Let's be 3,000 about it.
You were frustrated.
I was very frustrated.
Very.
And the reason that I can have so much vulnerability and grace, so much grace for you, because I know how much grace I needed from God.